appreciate the opportunity to speak this evening. Brother Joy had mentioned it to me a couple of months ago. I would speak one night. Was trying to do things from the congregation some, and we'll have invited speakers too. And I appreciate the opportunity by the brethren to do this. I jokingly say this, halfway jokingly say this. I'll say this first though. Brother Rick and Brother Scott's done an excellent job. I appreciate what they did. I used to work with a guy though years ago where he was humorous, and he'd always say, Don, if their expectations are low, they won't be disappointed. So if your expectations are high, just go ahead and lower, but you won't be disappointed. So everything will be okay. All right. But anyway, tonight we're going to talk about Rahab. In the book of Hebrews, chapter 11, it's commonly called the Hall of Faith. And of course, it speaks about faith. And it gives us a list of names of individuals who have great faith. There's two women that are in the Hall of Faith. One is Sarah. She was married to Abraham. She's basically the mother of Israel is what she would be. She was had great faith and is mentioned for that great faith. She was also great in the Jewish tradition because she was the mother of Israel. The other is Rahab. In Hebrews chapter 11 and verse 31, it says, by faith Rahab the harlot perished not with them that were disobedient, having received the spies with peace. Now, most of the translations translate this word as harlot, but I think the ESV, and that may have been what Daniel was reading from, uses the word prostitute, which is probably a word that we're more familiar with. It's prostitute. It's not a good name to have, is it? You've got the mother of Israel, who's one person in the Hall of Faith, and then the other one is Rahab the harlot. But as we see, as we go through this study, I think we're going to see a lot of great things from Rahab. James chapter 2 and verse 25, which was our Bible reading, it says, and in like manner was not also Rahab the harlot justified by works, in that she received the messengers and sent them out another way. In Hebrews 11 and 31, because of her faith, she didn't perish like the others in Jericho, and we'll read about her family also. But in James 2 and 25, it says she was justified because of her faith. That means she was made righteous because of her faith. She had a good relationship with God because of her faith. Now, of course, of her name, Rahab the harlot, there's some of the commentators, though, and they may have a legitimate argument, that say she would have been past this point in her life. It was something in the past because of the courage she shows, the faith that she shows, the good character traits that she shows, that this would have been something that was in the past that was mentioned. I don't know. I'm not an English major and I'm not a Greek scholar, but, reading chapter 2, verse 1, it just says they went to the house of a harlot. So that seems to be in the present tense, that at the time that this story takes place, and we're going to read Joshua chapter 2 here in a little bit, so we'll be able to see this thing. We're probably all familiar with parts of it, but we may not be familiar with all of it. But irregardless whether it was in the past or in the present, we see the great power of God and how he works in her life and how the changes are made. That's why I was interested in trying to cover her. At first I thought I bit off more than I can chew, and I may have. But I found out a lot of good things studying about Rahab. First, it's Rahab's faith. Let's go ahead and read this first, then we'll tackle that. This is Joshua chapter 2. It says, then Joshua the son of Nun sent two men as spies secretly from Shittim, saying, go view the land, especially Jericho. So they went and came into the house of a harlot, whose name was Rahab, and lodged there. It was told the king of Jericho, saying, behold, men from the sons of Israel have come here tonight to search out the land. And the king of Jericho sent word to Rahab, saying, bring out the men who have come to you, who have entered your house, for they have come to search out all the land. But the woman had taken the two men and hidden them, and she said, yes, the men came to me, but I did not know where they were from. It came about when it was time to shut the gate at dark that the men went out. I do not know where the men went. Pursue them quickly, for you will overtake them. But she had brought them up to the roof and hidden them in the stalks of flax, which she had laid in order on the roof. So the men pursued them on the road to the Jordan, to the fords. As soon as those who were pursuing them had gone out, they shut the gate. Now before they lay down, she came up to them on the roof and said to the men, I know that the Lord has given you the land, and that the terror of you has fallen on us, and that all the inhabitants of the land have melted away before you. For we have heard how the Lord dried up the water of the Red Sea before you when you came out of Egypt, and what you did to the two kings of the Amorites who were beyond the Jordan, to Sihon and Og, whom you utterly destroyed. When we heard it, our hearts melted, and no courage remained in any man any longer because of you, for the Lord your God, he is the God in heaven above and on earth beneath. Now therefore, please swear to me by the Lord, since I have dealt kindly with you, that you also would deal kindly with my father's household, and give me a pledge of truth, and spare my father and my mother and my brothers and my sisters with all who belong to them, and deliver our lives from death. So the men said to her, I'll lie for years if you do not tell this business of ours, and it shall come about when the Lord gives us the land that we will deal kindly and faithfully with you. Then she let them down by a rope through the window, for her house was on the city wall, so that she was living on the wall. She said to them, Go to the hill country, so that the pursuers will not happen upon you, and hide yourselves there for 3 days until the pursuers return. Then afterward you may go on your way. The men said to her, We shall be free from this oath to you, which you have made us swear, unless when we come into the land you tie this cord of scarlet thread in the window through which you let us down, and gather to yourself into the house your father and your mother and your brothers and all your father's household. It shall come about that anyone who goes out of the doors of your house into the street, his blood shall be on his own head, and we shall be free. But anyone who is with you in the house, his blood shall be on our head, if a hand is laid on him. But if you tell this business of ours, then we shall be free from the oath which you have made us swear. And she said, According to your word, so be it. So she sent them away, and they departed, and she tied the scarlet cord in the window. They departed and came to the hill country, and remained there for 3 days until the pursuers returned. Now the pursuers had sought them all along the road, but had not found them. Then the two men returned and came down from the hill country, and crossed over and came to Joshua the son of Nun. And they related to him all that had happened to them. And they said to Joshua, Surely the Lord has given all the land into our hands. Moreover, all the inhabitants of the land have melted away before us. Rahab's faith. In the first few verses there, we see this king, king of Jericho. And I don't know how they found out that these guys were in her house. I don't know if their language or accent or whatever gave them away. But he knew that they were there. Someone had told him that. So he sends people to her house and, basically says, turn these people over. And she tells them, they're not here. She tells them a story and says, they're not here, She put herself at risk when she did that. She could have said, yeah, they're here. Come and get them. She'd have been safe. But she didn't do that. She put herself at risk because of the faith that she had. And we see that verses 1 through 6. Now, I bring this up because sometimes when we see these cities, Jericho and some of these others, sometimes we may think, well, that's like a mayor of a city, And not saying they don't have lots of power, but this guy's a king. And in Joshua chapter 6 and verse 2, it says that God tells Joshua, he says, I'm going to give you Jericho, the king and his valiant men. This was a guy that had resources. He had soldiers. He had power. And what did he do? He sends somebody to Rahab and says, here, turn them over. And she says, I don't have them. She stood up to him. She protected those spies because she had faith. It would have been easy for her to have just turned them over, but she didn't do it. And one thing during the study that I've seen, a lot of times the reading we read, she says the Lord. She calls him the Lord. The word she uses, you look at I guess it's the Hebrew, it's called Jehovah. She called him Jehovah. She used the same exact wording that the Israelites used with these when they called him God. She had been listening. She'd been paying attention. And we see that with her faith. She refers to him just like they do. She doesn't say your God or a God or, another God. She says the God. And in verse 11, we see that she mentions, he's the God in heaven above and earth beneath. She had great faith. The Red Sea crossing, she mentions that. That would have been 50 years before this time took place. About 1450 BC is when the Red Sea, it was parted and they crossed. I believe that's right. And about 1400 BC is when this took place. She would have been a young girl I believe, this is just me from my studies, I'm going to say she's a lady in her 20s. That's my guess. She's a young lady. She wouldn't have been alive when they crossed the Red Sea. She didn't see it. And then she mentioned some other things that took place. She didn't see, she just heard. Y'all destroyed these Amorites. That's what's amazing to me about her faith, is she didn't see these things, she just heard about them. Now, I do a little Bible thing in the morning as I get ready to go to work, and it's on YouVersion. I'm going to throw this out here because if you're busy in the mornings but you want to sort of cover the Bible, YouVersion's got it where it reads to you. It's a pretty good little program, so I can do things as I'm getting ready for work, and I can listen to the Word of God. Part of it that's been covered recently is these Israelites. They saw the Red Sea part. They've seen all these miracles. They were there when they took place. Every time the wind don't blow the way they think it should blow, they just fall apart. They just fall apart. Moses got to deal with them. They're punished. Things happen. And they saw it. And here this lady is, who's not an Israelite, by the way, and she just heard about it, and she believes it. Great faith. That's why she's in the hall of faith. She believed what she heard to be true, but she didn't doubt. And she made a choice, too, because of her great faith. She could have chose the king. She could have went with the Jericho, went with the home folks, but she didn't do it. She chose God. She chose the Israelites. She chose God and his people. That's what we see from her great faith. And as we mentioned earlier, she believed all of this without seeing it. And just as encouragement, it was encouraging to me. I thought about this when I was looking at this study of her. John chapter 20, verses 27 through 29. And what the scene is here, we've all heard of doubting Thomas. Oh, doubting Thomas. He didn't believe what happened with Jesus. He rose from the dead and those things like this. So we pick up on verse 27, and this is Jesus talking to Thomas. He said, then he said to Thomas, reach here with your fingers and see my hands, and reach here your hand and put it into my side, and do not be unbelieving, but believing. Thomas answered and said to him, my Lord and my God. And Jesus said, because you have seen me, have you believed? Blessed are they who did not see and yet believed. We didn't see Jesus walk on the water. We didn't see him heal the demons or the blind or raise the dead. But we believe, don't we? We believe. And that's a blessing to us. So that's why I wanted to mention that. We're blessed because we're like Rahab. We didn't see these things, but we believed them anyway. We'll pick up on some other things I've noticed about her just in the reading and studying. She was a good leader. She wasn't just a leader. She was a good leader. Everybody in this room, at some point in time, we're a leader. It may be in our businesses, it may be in our homes, it may be of our children, it may be at school, it may be on a sports team, but everybody in here is a leader and has been a leader. Well, she was a leader too, but she was a good leader. She had the attributes, and there's a lot of attributes that good leaders have. These are three that she has. And too, I should have mentioned this at the first. I'm just trying to do a character study of Rahab. We're just looking at Rahab. There's things we can learn from her. And I'm just trying to cover some things that I saw, and I'm sure there's people who see a lot of other great traits that she had. But I'm just trying to cover the things that deal with her in particular, things that I saw that apply to us that we could use and help us see how she develops. She was a good leader. She wasn't just a leader, she was a good leader. Good leaders are able to see circumstances, times, seasons, changes. They can see what's going to happen. You know, that old, which back then they didn't have trains, but you know, they were saying if trains come down the track, you need to get off the track. Well, she saw that. She saw it coming. She saw the Israelites were coming. She knew it wasn't good for Jericho. She knew that people were going to die because in end of verse 13, she's talking to these two spies. She talks about them saving their brothers and all that. And she says, the last part of that verse 13, she says, deliver our lives from death. She saw what was coming. She knew something had to be done here. She was a good leader. She understood what was happening. Another good quality that she had, she was focused on others. That's a good quality that good leaders have. She was focused on others. When she made a decision, she didn't make a decision just about her. She could have just jumped out that window, couldn't she, when they left? She could have just climbed down the rope and said, I'm going with you fellas. I'm getting out of Jericho. I know what's going to happen. But she didn't do it. She made a decision that was beneficial not only to her, but to her family. She looked at it, and that's a good lesson for all of us. It's easy to think about my own self, but when I make a decision, I need to look at who my family, the other people it might affect, church members, everybody. Well, that's what she did. She was focused on others. It wasn't just about Rahab. And she did things to go along with that. And another quality of a good leader is they take responsibility and action. She took responsibility for this. She didn't go have a meeting with somebody and determine what she needed to do and all that. She's cut a deal with these spies, basically, and said, hey, I'll do this for you, but I need y'all to do this for me and my family. And they told her, said, okay, yeah, we'll do that, but you're going to have to hang that scarlet cord out your window. You know, you're going to have to hang that cord out the window, and you're going to have to keep your family inside the house, because when we come in, you know, if your folks are out there running around, we can't guarantee their safety, but if you keep them in your house, we can guarantee them their safety. And this proved true. Like we said, she saw what was happening, and we won't read it, but in Joshua chapter 6, when they take Jericho, the only thing that survives is her and her family. They killed everybody when they took Jericho. They killed the animals. They killed the dogs, the cats, the donkeys. They killed everything. They took the silver and gold. They were allowed to do that, but they utterly killed everything in Jericho. And like I said, part of that good leader part, she saw that, but also she did something about it. She just didn't sit there and wait. She did something about it. Something I also come across with her, she was industrious. Now, a lot of the commentaries call her an innkeeper. And I don't know, in verse 1, it says they come into her house and stayed. So I don't know, I should have talked to a guy. He stays in these things. I think they call them Airbnbs or something like that. You know, where you rent a room out of your house or something to somebody. She might have been a trendsetter. She's doing an Airbnb there. But she was renting out rooms in her house to people. And she would have had to keep those rooms clean. She probably provided food and drink for them. It'd been just like a hotel or something. You know, people are traveling. They don't have all those things with them. So she was industrious. And again, and I may be wrong, and I think she was a young girl. Now, not being hard on young girls here, but she was a 20-year-old. I'm going to say 20 to 25, maybe, something like that. Just looking at it, because we see later she gets married and she has a kid, so she was childbearing age. And but here she is. She's sort of running a business. She's renting space out and things like that. But she was also a hard worker. I think we talked about flax, maybe Brother Rick did Tuesday night. Flax was an important plant back in that time. It was imported up probably to the late 1700s, early 1800s. Cotton finally took over. But this was an important plant for thousands of years. And what they did with it, and this is what she hid the spies in, was the flax. She laid the flax on the roof, and she hid them up there amongst that. This flax was used to make clothing. There was an oil that was extracted from it. And then what they didn't use to make clothing and extract the oil, they fed to the cattle. They didn't waste anything. She was working with this flax. She was working with her hands. She was a hard worker. They had it tough back then. And here she is. She's got all this laid up here. She's running it in, basically. Here she is working with this flax. And what they did is they had to work that, take the fibers off of it, and they used it for linen, clothing, different things like that. She was industrious. And Proverbs chapter 31, part of that chapter is called The Worthy Woman. And in it, it talks about the qualities of a really good woman. Well, in Proverbs 31 and 13, it says, she seeketh wool and flax and worketh willingly with her hands. She had good qualities, didn't she? And maybe the commentators are right. She may have been past that bad part of her life. And, you know, because we see so many good qualities from her. She was a worker. She was a hard worker. She was a young lady in doing all of these things. And Rahab, she cared for her family. Like I said, we mentioned it, the leadership part. When she made decisions, she wasn't just thinking about herself. She thought about her family. She cared about her family. She looked out for her family. She helped provide for the family, but she provided their safety, didn't she? She sat down with these guys and said, here, protect my family. You know, she cared about her family. It's a great lesson for us. We have our physical families, and we care about them. We care about our families. We got a church family, though, too. We need to care about it, don't we? And I think we do. I don't think that's a problem here. This is a loving and great congregation. But we should care about one another. She cared about her family. And it may have been, I thought about this, you know, she wasn't probably held in high esteem in Jericho with a name like Rahab the harlot. Okay, let's just be honest. She probably didn't have a good name. Her family was probably looked down upon. People probably mistreated her. You know, she wouldn't have been somebody held in high esteem, and that's understandable because of her so-called profession. You know, so she could have easily said, I'm getting out of Jericho. You know, I'm going with these guys and I'm leaving. But she didn't. She saved her family from what was coming. And like we mentioned earlier, it wasn't good what happened to Jericho. Rahab also was a good parent. Now, Brother Joy mentioned in there, she was in the lineage of Christ. In Matthew chapter 1, I believe it's verse 5, it says she was married to a guy named Salmon, S-A-L-M-O-N, just like the fish. That's how it's spelled. She was married to him. She's in the lineage of Christ. She would have been David's, if I looked at it right, great-great-grandma. That's what she'd have been to King David. His great-great-grandma. She had, her and her husband had a son named Boaz. And if you're ever on Jeopardy and they ask you about Boaz, Alabama, who's it named after, it's Boaz in the Bible. So it's a little side information there. I looked that up, and I wondered about that, and that's what it said. It's Boaz, Alabama. It's named after Boaz in the Bible. But you read a lot about Boaz in the book of Ruth. And Ruth's about 4 chapters. So if you ever get a chance, you got time, it's a good little read there. Four chapters. Very informative, very good. A lot of good lessons in it. Well, her and Salmon have Boaz. Well, Boaz, if you look at the book of Ruth, you see he in Ruth chapter 2, verse 1, I think it's the American Standard Version, says he is a mighty man of wealth. He was a mighty man of wealth, Boaz was. If you look at reading that chapter, he was very good at handling the old law. He knew it. He understood the old law and the things that come into play with Ruth. Which they end up getting married, but there was certain process they had to go through because of property rights and deaths in the family and like that. It was complicated, but he understood every bit of it. He also knew the customs of the times, and he was held in high esteem. In the book of Ruth, you can see the community thought highly of him. He calls the leading men in just to sit down and talk, and here they come. They sit down and talk with him, and it's about Ruth. So we can give Rahab some credit here. Salmon, he would have known the old law. He would have, in Jewish tradition is, now this is not in the Bible, Jewish tradition is that Salmon was one of the 2 spies. Don't know that for sure. Just something, as long as I was doing my study, that's something that come out there, you know, that's what they say. But that's not in this book. But if true, understandable. But that's where the old law would have come from. And she would have had to have learned it too because she wasn't an Israelite. He knew these things. He knew about the old law. He would have learned that probably from his dad. But he might have learned the mighty and the wealthy and how to work and run a business and do things because he, as you read about it, he had fields, he had property, he had places where they worked with those things. He may have learned that from Rahab. She may have told him how to run a business, showed him how to work hard with his hands, and how to be good person and a good kid. She's, to me, very, very positive influence in a lot of ways. And two, probably with Boaz, he thought, you know, here I am. Ruth is, she wasn't an Israelite either. But he thought, you know what, my mom wasn't either, and she's pretty good. You know, so when he ended up marrying Ruth there. He may have seen that also. You know, my mom's pretty good. She's not an Israelite per se. I guess she would have become a proselyte. But she wasn't an Israelite by birth. And another thing about Rahab, and this sort of funny in a way, but it's just a positive thing about her. She was clever. She was clever and convincing. Here the king sends these guys to her, and they, you know, they're like, you know, we heard 2 spies is here, hand them over. Well, she's clever. She thinks up of something quick. She gives them a story, you know, but she convinces them. They didn't say, okay, we're going to search your house, and then we'll go do. They just went and did what she told them to do. They went out the gate, go get them, you'll catch them. And they took off, and they went. She's probably been a great motivational speaker because, I mean, they just bought it hook, line, and sinker, and they took off. But two, what I also saw, you had these 2 men that Joshua sent. Now, Joshua was smart about how he handled this. See, Moses had sent him out, Caleb and 10 others. And they come back, and it was more of a public thing about how they did it. He sent the spies out. They went out. They come back. Here, Joshua, he sends 2 spies. It says he sent them secretly. He sent them out to spy out the land. And they were to report to him. They weren't supposed to report publicly. They were supposed to come directly back to him and report. And that's what they did. They would have been the 2 brightest, 2 probably toughest. They would have been people that would have been in battle. They'd seen a lot of tough things. He sent 2 guys out who could get the job done. That's who he sent out. And it's funny because, you know, she hides them, she saves them by hiding them, and then she's helping them escape. And she says, oh, yeah, I guess they're going out the window, you know. She says, go hide in the woods for 3 days, and then go. Because they'll be out on the roads looking for you. So go hide in the woods 3 days, and then you can go. Well, what did they do? Okay, let's think about it a minute. That's the way I thought about it. Here's these 2 guys, and I mentioned they're the best. They're the toughest. They can live off the land. They can do all this. They could have easily said, okay, lady, we appreciate you saving us all, but this is our neck of the woods here. We know how to live out on the land and get around and scurry around and hide. They didn't do that. It's like, okay, they go hide in the woods for 3 days, hang out in the woods, but then they go find Joshua. And it worked out just the way she said it would work out. Very clever, smart young lady. She's very convincing too. They didn't argue with her. They didn't backtalk her. They just did what she told them, and it worked out pretty good. But one thing she also did, another thing that she did, at the end of Joshua 2, they go back to Joshua and they say, we've spied out the land. It's basically, I'm paraphrasing here, it's ours. It's ours for the taking. And they use language that's nearly exactly to hers, though. The people's heart melted because of us. Now, I don't know when she told them that. She told them the truth. She told them what happened. You know, when Jericho heard what happened, they were all scared. Now, they didn't react the way she did. They didn't have the faith she did. They weren't obedient like she was. But they were scared. And she told these guys this. She said that, you know, everybody's heart just melted. We were scared. And they went back, encouraged, and used her language nearly to the letter. When they talked to Joshua, they went back and reported to him. Now, in chapter 6, but everything that she talked to them about happened. And I sort of got ahead of myself a while ago. The walls fell. Those Israelites come in there, and they killed everybody, except for Rahab and her family. That's the only ones that survived. And it says in there in chapter 6 that though it was writing about that, and it said they live with the Israelites to this day, which was meant when it was written, Joshua chapter 6. It happened exactly the way it was told to be happen. It would happen. It's She put the cord in the window. She did what they'd asked her to do. She kept her folks in the house. She didn't lose a one. And then the rest of Jericho was utterly destroyed. It worked out pretty well for her and her family. But she was an encouragement to those guys, the way she did things. I enjoyed my study reading about her and studying about her because, like I said, when I first started, I thought, well, should have went another direction. But as I went, I thought, no, this is pretty good. There's a lot of good lessons to learn from her. But what's really great about it is the power of God that we see. She's Rahab the prostitute. That's how she's known in 2 of the 3 verses in the New Testament. She's Rahab the prostitute. But we see she gets married. She raised a great kid who's in the lineage of Christ. She's in the lineage of Christ. And all these positive things. And her faith was so great. She's one of 2 women in the Hall of Faith. God's power to change people is great. And it started because she had faith. She just started out having faith. And it went from there, and she become a different person. So she's really no longer, to me, Rahab the prostitute. She's Rahab the faithful. That's what she is. There's no earthly saying, it's not where you start, it's where you finish. She finished pretty good. She finished with the righteous. That's who she finished with. She didn't finish over here. She finished over here. She's with the righteous. She's named with the righteous. God is forgiver. In just a verse, which I'll use it in the invitation, but it's Psalms 103 and verse 12. Psalms 103 and verse 12. It talks about sin. And this would have been Old Testament, but this is still true in the sense of how God deals with our sins, I believe. It says, as far as the east is from the west, so far hath he removed our transgressions from us. Well, I'm not a scientist, but as far as the east is from the west, that's probably would be infinite or whatever. You can't measure it. That's how far away they are. He is totally forgot our trespasses against him when we are faithful and we repent when we first become Christians, and then later on, 1 John chapter 1 and verse 9, he still does that with us that he become Christians. When we're faithful and we repent, Christ's blood still cleanses us. So we see the change in her, and we see the things that have happened with her and how positive her life become and the positive influence that Rahab had. It's 15 till. I guess we'll go ahead and ring the bell and then do the invitation. I appreciate you listening so patiently tonight. And like I said, I hope you lowered them expectations before we got started. But I do appreciate you very much. Thank you.